6, 7 months ago, I was in the DRC, the Congo, and I was working with a Nobel laureate there. He does repairs on women who've been raped. And in the Congo, pretty much most women will have been raped at some point in their life. And rape is both from a military standpoint, a way to control populations, as well as just a general way of life. And it's tragic. This particular doctor, he is Congolese. He's been doing these surgeries for 20 years. And he talks about how the women he repaired 20 years ago from the injuries, now their daughters are coming. So I had access, and I was shooting for his foundation. And then I said, hey, the last day I'm here, I want to gather some of the survivors and do portraits of them. And, you know, a lot of times the survivors, he's the Dr. Mukwege, he's the Nobel laureate. He's one of the few people in the world who the UN has security follow him around because they've tried to kill him. Super cool dude. But this whole hospital is around, the hospital has become a hospital that does all sorts of stuff, but it specializes in rape survivors. So I worked really in collaboration with the women, the survivors, and I said, what are the reasons that the military has so much control here? And one of them is for gold, right? Congo is probably the richest, minerally rich country in the world. It should be up here with like America, right? But there's so much corruption, and it's a country just in complete disarray. And so I talked to the women and I said, okay, what are the elements we can show to help illustrate, while not showing your faces, you know, rape is a weapon of war. And so we had the gold in the previous photo. We have this photo, you know, the shovel. And what was great about working with these women is I brought in my background, which I have here, and then I used lights, and I worked with the women, and they were like helping dress each other and be like, oh, no, we have to put the shawl here. And then I'd show them the photos, and then they would like do something else. And it was really this collaborative process. But what was incredible, so after I finished photographing them, I had an assignment in Uganda, but and I found this story about men being raped in Africa. And this I didn't know about. And when men are raped, it destroys the society, because men, if they're raped, they're now considered, they're no longer men. So even their wives will be like, you're not a man anymore. I don't want you in my life. And they get no support. And so the only men who admit to being raped are those who've been they've been seriously injured, and now they have to go to the hospital to be repaired. But I interviewed these men, and even within this organization, like this little NGO of survivors they had set up, you know, we went into a separate room one-on-one, and they just told me these horrific stories. And then I shot photos, and I brought these, again, props along. I ran out and bought some army men, right? And sand, minerals, gold, not bauxite, there's another word for another mineral. So mines are a big thing in Congo, but the men were also from South Sudan, Burundi, Congo. So it's a whole problem throughout that Central African region, where politically, militarily, people are using rape as a weapon of war. So I really thought, like, this personal project is so worth it. This will be easy to find a home to publish. Nobody would publish it. It took months. I happened to run into, long story, but there was a German publication who agreed to run it. Once they did a story on it, I was able to get it picked up by Al Jazeera English as well. But it was so hard to sell. And I was like, but this is so strange. Here's a story. There's a written story. All the photos have extensive, like, first person captions. and yet it was almost impossible to get published. And that's one of the biggest problems as a freelancer. We might do projects we believe in, but in today's world, people really don't want to know about it. And that's a hard thing to come to terms with as a freelancer. And if anyone else is a photographer who's on this, Zoom meeting, that's one thing to really consider. Like, you should always work on personal projects, but you really need to think about who you could sell it to, or what the market's for, or maybe there's no market and maybe you're doing it just because your heart tells you you have to. And I think that's becoming more and more a reality for photographers.
Yeah, that's quite true, actually. I mean, in Indonesia, especially, I live here my whole life, and we're facing the same problem. That it's a big homework for us. That photographers, we make beautiful pictures, but sometimes we don't know how to sell. We don't know how to market our work, And if you at some point had troubles doing that, I can really relate about that.
Yeah, no, and it's the reality we're all facing. Even talking to editors, 20 years ago when I started, it was very easy to get in contact with photo editors, and people were at least willing to talk to new people off the street, right? If you came to them with a portfolio. It's not like that anymore. And now with the pandemic, it's gotten even worse. If you're a freelancer, people don't want to touch you. And I think that's also a really big issue as well. But yeah, anyways, that's sort of the story on the rape as a weapon of war.